Hello, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the psychiatric patient who killed someone days after his release from a secure facility, who has now been released once again. Lewis Stone was killed by David Fleet 6 years ago. Fleet was sectioned after admitting manslaughter with diminished responsibility. I've been speaking to Lewis's stepdaughter, who's desperate to know why Fleet is being allowed out again. It's a case with obvious parallels to the Nottingham attacks, and today a major step forward in the family's fight for justice. The government has appointed the judge who will investigate the killing of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates, with the power to examine all agencies involved and compel witnesses to give evidence. We'll hear tonight from Barnaby and Grace's mums. Plus, the Prime Minister is accused of a U-turn in the trans debate as ministers welcome the Supreme Court's landmark ruling last week. And opening its doors, the home of golf, St Andrews offers more than 700 lucky amateurs the chance to follow in the footsteps of legends for a fraction of the normal cost. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. But we begin tonight in Vatican City, where officials confirmed today that the funeral of Pope Francis will take place on Saturday. Prince William will be there on behalf of the King, and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will also attend, as well as US President Donald Trump. Conclave, the process to elect the next Pope, can then begin from Monday the 5th of May, following 9 days of official mourning. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports from the Vatican.
For the first time in more than a decade, the Vatican awoke with no Pope to look to for guidance. Here's an absence felt by more than 1 billion Catholics. By the morning, nearly half the world's cardinals had arrived. These are the people who will decide the name of the next Pope. But their first task was to schedule Francis's funeral, and they chose Saturday morning. The crowds here growing fast. They mourn, but many also celebrate a life that inspired them. Sister Mary moved to Rome from Kenya 10 years ago. How will you remember him?
I will remember him especially for his smile, his love, his humanity, and a man who gave us hope, even when we thought that everything is lost. I will remember him that way.
We now know the Pope woke as normal on Monday at 6 a.m, but suffered a stroke about an hour later. A police escort was requested to get him to hospital, and it was then cancelled when it became clear that Francis could not recover. The Pope lies in state within the Vatican. His funeral service will be held here, but then he will be taken across Rome to the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, where he will be buried. There we met Marcela and Pablo, here from Buenos Aires, and deeply proud of their Argentinian compatriot.
He worked a lot with young people, with the humble and the poor.
We already knew what he was like when he was Bishop of Buenos Aires. He would travel on the metro. He didn't have a driver. He did mass in the poor areas, and he worked a lot on the issue of immigration. It was something that really concerned him.
Back at the Vatican, the sun beats down and the square ever more packed. Pope Francis's decision not to be buried here at St Peter's, but instead across town at Santa Maria Maggiore, is a break with tradition. It's not unprecedented, but it's certainly unusual. And it means that the task of organising this event, already dauntingly complex, has now become even more complicated. Prince William will represent the King. Keir Starmer will also attend. Presidents and prime ministers from America, France, Germany, and of course Italy and Argentina are all coming to Rome, and many more leaders will follow. The security operation is huge. Cars banned, a no-fly zone, and police boats on the Tiber. It is a big challenge for Matteo Scamma, the person in charge of protecting everyone and everything involved in this funeral.
This
is certainly something new for us, but we'll be ready for this occasion. We'll have enough personnel to ensure safety both at the Vatican and during the transfer, which is also important, and then of course at the event itself, for the burial.
Pope Francis's body will be moved into St. Peter's Basilica tomorrow, when the public will be able to file past, and the crowds here will simply grow and grow. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Vatican City.
Well, here in the UK, a special Mass for Pope Francis is being held at Liverpool Metropolitan Cathedral this evening. The cathedral has also opened a book of condolence for those wishing to leave a message. Our Chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, is there in Liverpool for us this evening. And Greg, we saw in Rome people heading from all over the world to the Vatican ahead of the funeral on Saturday. Talk to me about what's happening there in Liverpool and how Catholics there are paying their respects.
Yeah, the Archbishop of Liverpool today said that this was a chance for Catholics to pray for Pope Francis, to reflect on his life, but also for non-Catholics, for other Christians, for people of no faith to come and think about his life. And when you look at some of the messages in that book of condolence, it's clear people have thought about that life, and in particular his work, as so often is mentioned in comments there, for the poor and the downtrodden. But this in a city that, of course, has got such a Catholic heritage, such a large Catholic population, was an important moment, and the Archbishop, the Reverend Malcolm McMahon, saying in his homily in the last hour that they were there to pray for Pope Francis, describing him as a self-effacing man who wanted nothing for himself, and talked about him being a man who would go to the edges of society to meet people there and talk about that overwhelming sense of peace that he often saw. He met Pope Francis on numerous occasions, and saying what mattered to him was people. So that the Archbishop in his homily, he'd said earlier about people here feeling bereft. They'd lost the Holy Father, as they refer to him, but for many people it felt like losing a father. And as I say, those comments in the Book of Condolence very much reflecting that. The Archbishop saying people here were encouraged by Pope Francis, whether they'd ever been to Rome, whether they'd ever been in his presence. That was what they felt, that personal connection, and that's why it was so important for them to come here tonight, the first opportunity really at a Mass to mark his death and to reflect on the life that he led.
Greg, thank you. Greg Milam for us in Liverpool tonight. Well, here in the studio, I'm joined now by Ruth Gledhill from the weekly Catholic journal, The Tablet. Ruth, good to see you. Thank you for coming in. First of all, can I ask for a personal reflection on the passing of the Pope? He meant so much to Catholics worldwide, but so many people have personal thoughts and feelings about him. Such was a man. He was described as the people's Pope.
Well, I was devastated when I heard he had died. I was actually about to get on a plane to Lourdes to go on pilgrimage with HTPT, a pilgrimage trust that helps disabled children and other disadvantaged children. And I had to turn around and come back. It was such a shock that he had died after he seemed to be on a trajectory to recovery after his hospital visits. But personally, he meant a huge amount to me because I became a Catholic during his papacy. And, you know, my past is not faultless. So I had always thought before that I wasn't good enough to be a Catholic because I couldn't, you know, come up to the standards required. But he made the church seem much more open and accessible. And his approach to the church and to the faith and to welcoming people and inclusivity made me feel that it would be possible for me, with all my imperfections, to actually take that step and become a Catholic.
That's so interesting. He was the reason that you came into the Catholic faith. What was it about what he said? Because, as I said, he's been described as the people's Pope. His legacy is seen as one of inclusivity, managing to tread that fine line between traditionalism and liberalism, which is so difficult in the church in the modern day and age. What was it that spoke to you?
I think it was the way he, from the very start, when he eschewed the finery and the pomp of the office and went to live in the guest house and the way he was, he certainly, or his team certainly knew how to use modern media and social media. And,
making him more accessible.
Yeah, and the way he was able to communicate. And, you know, my whole life I've been in the business of communication. I've been a journalist all my life. And so I really kind of loved a Pope who was so keen to communicate and was comprehensible, you know, didn't speak in ways that, I mean, I couldn't understand him because he didn't speak very good English.
But he put things in layman's terms, didn't he?
He did. He spoke once things were interpreted, translated, you could understand what he said, and he spoke in very accessible language, and I liked that.
He sort of, as much as you can being the Pope, he sort of did away with a lot of the pomp and ceremony and brought it down to a level that everyone can understand.
Yeah, and he always cut to the chase.
Yeah.
So he always, you know, he really was very blunt about what he believed and what he said, and I liked the way he wasn't afraid.
Wasn't afraid. Had a good sense of humour, I understand, as well, because when he was chosen as the Pope, those who...
One of the first things he said on that his famous quote on the plane, coming back from on the papal plane from his first trip abroad, when asked about the gay question, who am I to judge, you know? And that, I thought, really spoke to me, who am I to judge?
Yeah. Can we talk about what happens next? I've talked about the sort of internal struggle between traditional and liberal values within the Catholic Church. What does the Catholic Church need from the next Pope, do you think?
Well, I personally think that it needs someone who can continue his reforming agenda. But I think possibly he was clearly a man in a bit of a hurry. He was quite old. People thought he was too old at 76 to be elected Pope in the last conclave. And he thought, I think, he wouldn't have as long as he did. So he always seemed to be a man in a hurry. He wanted to get as much done as possible in the time available to him. And although I would love it if the Church, and I think a lot of people out there, especially women, would love it if the Church continued in a reforming way, you know, to get more to the Vatican II Church, the Church envisaged by the Second Vatican Council, which was what Pope Francis wanted. I think maybe the cardinal electors, although 2/3 of them were chosen by Pope Francis, so they probably are on the same page in many respects, but they probably might want someone who might want to bring a period of stability and maybe to consolidate on what Pope Francis has done rather than introduce radical reforms of their own.
It's worth talking people through how the process of electing a new Pope, how it works, because we talk about the conclave. For those who don't know, what is that? Who is in it? How does it work? Who votes and how long does it take? It's, you know, people are learning a lot about it from a recent Oscar-nominated film, but perhaps you can talk us through the process without the Hollywood drama.
Well, it comes from the word key, clave, key, and it's about the keys, and it's held under very strict lock and key, the actual conclave. But I'd like to mention the very important facts that the film actually didn't really go into, was that the really important meetings, in lots of people's views, take place before the conclave. So in the conclave, only cardinals aged under 80 can vote. But there were lots of cardinals, including one of our own, Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald, one of 4 cardinals we have, of which 3 can vote, who will be in Rome but aren't able to vote, but they will be very busy having dinners and meeting people and talking.
Is there a degree of lobbying that goes on?
I don't think we can call it quite lobbying because it's not
conversations, persuasive conversations.
But I interviewed Michael Fitzgerald the other day for the tablet, and he was very open about the fact that he wants to go there and be there for those conversations. And I asked him actually who was his favourite candidate, expecting an equivocal response. And he came straight out and said Cardinal Tagle of the Philippines, who is one of the bookies' favourites.
He would be the first Asian Pope.
Exactly, yes.
What is it about him that is making him one of the favourites?
He's very much on the same page as Pope Francis and very similar. Some people say he's fallen out of favour, though, in recent times. I don't know really about that, but I think he's certainly someone to be considered as a possibility. There are others as well, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State, who would be a continuity candidate. And then there's a guy who's maybe a bit young, but he's only about 60, I think, Cardinal Pizzabella. Apart from his fantastic name, he's Italian. And I think the Italians would love another Italian pope because it's been quite a while since they had an Italian pope. Poland, Germany, Argentina. And so he's currently the Latin patriarch, Latin head of the Catholic Church in Jerusalem. Yeah. So he has been very effective and is very highly regarded for how he's been responding in the present situation in the Holy Land. And Pope Francis, as we know, had a very keen interest in those issues and phoned the parish in Gaza every day, apart from maybe 1 or 2 days he missed when he was in hospital. So I think he might be someone to be considered as well. There may be next time, not this time, who knows.
And just briefly, well, I don't know if the process is brief, but I understand that Pope Francis was chosen inside a day. Is that usual? How long can it take, this whole process of deciding who the new Pope is?
I think that 1922 or something was the longest conclave. But normally you would expect it to take place under 5 days.
OK. Well, Ruth, thank you for coming in to talk to us about your reflections on Pope Francis and your hopes for a newly elected Pope. That process gets underway on the 5th of May, the funeral of Pope Francis, of course, on Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us, Ruth. I really appreciate it. Ruth Gledhill there from The Tablet. Now, the family of a man killed by a psychiatric patient say they have been treated like dirt after learning that his attacker has been granted permission to leave hospital. Lewis Stone was stabbed to death by David Fleet in a random attack in 2019, shortly after Mr. Fleet had been released into the community. Lewis's family were informed that Fleet is once again being allowed out of hospital, just hours after Sky News aired their first TV interview calling for answers in Lewis's case. I spoke to Rad Seeger, who is representing the family, and Lewis's stepdaughter, Vicky Lindsay.
It was yet again another kick in the teeth. I was very angry, but not shocked. Like, we've had this time and time again. He's been treated as the victim and the main focus throughout.
Rad, we hear this so much, don't we? Family is excluded from the process of making these decisions, often not being kept informed regularly enough and just being told when the decision's been made, and they're certainly not being told why these decisions have been made. In some cases, people are finding out after the person has been released into the community.
That's right, Sarah-Jane, and in this case, it's even worse because 6 years on, they still don't know what went so badly wrong when he was initially released and left free to kill Lewis. And that to me is astonishing, that this family, after all this time, still don't know what happened. And things clearly went wrong. You don't need to be a psychiatrist to know that if a patient like David Fleet is released and then kills 10 days later, that he clearly should not have been released. Something went badly wrong in his treatment and in his management. Clear failure in risk assessment. So you would have thought that somebody would have come forward to this family and just held their hands up and said, sorry, we got this wrong. Here's what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again. And that might have helped. But this family have been struggling to get answers all this time and have basically been told they're never going to get answers. So imagine going through those subsequent years with no information, only to then be told, hey, you know what? He's recovering, he's recovered, he's going to be released.
The health board responsible for the assessment of David Fleet has said it doesn't intend to release an internal report into Mr. Fleet's care. Vicky, that must be really confusing because on the one hand, there is this duty of candour where health boards are obliged to give information into their decisions. But on the other hand, they will not release certain information. And Rad, that can be conflicting, isn't it? Because on one hand, you know, you have to look after the victim's family, but on another is the privacy of the patient and care for them as well. They don't seem to be getting the balance right, perhaps.
Sarah-Jane, you'll remember just a couple of months ago, you and I were working together on the Nottingham stabbings case, that awful case. And in in that case, again, the NHS refused to disclose the report, but it was under pressure from us that they were eventually compelled to disclose that 300-page report, which portrayed a completely different picture to the one that had been out before. This is exactly the same situation. We're in a slightly different jurisdiction in Wales. This report will be disclosed. There's no question about it. And I just appeal to the health board to stop putting this family through this torture and just come clean.
Vicky, does there need to be more transparency, not just for your family to be able to see in black and white if mistakes were made that led to the killing of your father, but also for confidence in public safety as well? Should these reports be made public?
100%. I mean, the reports and answers, they're not going to bring... Sorry.
Take your time.
They're not going to bring Lewis back for us. But my biggest fear is another family going through what we've gone through.
Yeah, Rad, freedom of information requests made by the victim support organisation 100 Families have found that nearly 400 people were killed by former mental health patients between 2018 and 2023. But you believe this number to be far higher.
Yeah, we think those numbers are... There is no accurate data, but we think those numbers are underreported. And, you know, there appear to be between 100 and 200 mental health-related homicides each year. So you raise this issue of public safety and public interest. We say that completely outweighs the patient's right to confidentiality, which is what the health board are relying on. And this health board have said to the family that they've learned lessons, that they've made improvements, but you as a journalist, you don't get to scrutinize that. The advisors don't get to scrutinize that. And how can any of us be sure that this will never happen again? Plainly, the NHS does not do a good job of learning lessons. And we think one of the reasons is that because they don't come clean and share the learnings with the family, with the public, and maybe then we could all move forward and learn lessons. But this bearing the report on the basis that David Fleet, who's a patient, he has a right to confidentiality. You wouldn't want your medical records disclosed, nor would I, but you haven't killed in these horrific circumstances, and nor have I.
Vicky, you want transparency, but you also want accountability. No organisation or individual has admitted a mistake or error of judgment in events that led up to your father's killing. How important is that to you for somebody to say, we got it wrong, and nobody seems to want to say that or to apologise? When asked if they would be willing to apologise to affected families, to both affected families, the family of David Fleet and to the Stone family, this is what came from Hywel Dda Health Board. In the event of serious incidents, we have robust processes in place for reviewing internally, identifying any issues and, where appropriate, preparing an improvement plan to prevent such an occurrence in the future. We regret such incidents and always seek to learn from them. No accountability and certainly no apology for you, Vicky.
Regret for a human life. Regret.
How does it make you feel to hear that, Vicky?
That Lewis meant nothing. And he did mean something to all of us.
How do you feel about David Fleet being released from hospital to try and reintegrate into society without knowing for sure, having seen the reports, whether he's safe or not?
I'm angry and I'm scared. We're being asked to trust a system that already failed us. My biggest fear is it's going to happen again. And I don't sleep at night thinking of other families going through what we've gone through. Scared and angry.
Yeah. Rad, this is happening to so many other families, not just the Stone family. What do you want to see happen now?
We need that report, and it will be disclosed. Now, we have to fight them for it. We will, but we'd rather them just come forward and help this family and come clean, as they did with the Nottingham families. That's the right thing to do. We can't turn the clock back, Sarah-Jane, for this family, and that breaks my heart. I wish there was more I could do to help. But what we can do is make sure that Lewis's passing was not in vain, that he leaves a legacy that there will be lessons learned.
A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said this: we understand this decision will be difficult for the Stone family and our thoughts are with them. Any decision to approve access to the community is only made after a thorough risk assessment and with strict safeguards in place. A spokesperson from Hywel Dda University Health Board said this: the duty of candour for patients came into force in Wales in April 2023. At the time of this incident and concern, we fulfilled our duties to be open. When asked if they would be willing to apologise to both affected families, they said, in the event of serious incidents, we have robust processes in place for reviewing internally, identifying any issues, and where appropriate, preparing an improvement plan to prevent such an occurrence in the future. We regret such incidents and always seek to learn from them. Another statement, this from a Welsh Government spokesperson: we are fully committed to openness and transparency in line with the duty of candour to ensure lessons are learned. We have also invested in improving both the quality and safety of mental health care in Wales. Still to come on the UK Tonight, with clear parallels to that story, the government has appointed the judge who will lead the inquiry into the Nottingham attacks. I'll be speaking to the victims' families, who say it is a landmark moment.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Now, before the break, we brought you the story of Lewis Stone, who was killed by a psychiatric patient who had just been released from a secure unit. And Lewis's family have now been told his killer is being let out once again. It's a case that has obvious parallels to the Nottingham attacks. And today, the government formally confirmed a statutory inquiry into the deaths of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Kumar and Ian Coates will take place and will be chaired by a former judge. Ian, Barnaby and Grace were stabbed and killed by paranoid schizophrenic Valdo Calacane in June 2023. Their deaths prompted widespread criticism of how authorities handled the case and questions over how Calacane could be on the streets. Well, the review into the attacks will have legal powers to compel witnesses to give evidence. The families of the victims described it as a landmark moment. Earlier, I spoke to Grace and Barnaby's mums, Sinead and Emma.
It's a horrible thing to have to say, hold people to account, but there are countless agencies, organisations and individuals who have failed so enormously and so grievously that they should be held to account, because we found out that in the last 6 years, there have been well over 400 deaths through homicide, through mental health homicide. And it's not being vindictive, it's actually recognising that the mental health support and treatment in this country is failing so abysmally. That 400 people, over 400, have been murdered, which would have been preventable deaths. And we also know with ours, it's not just... we call him the monster, and he always will be a monster in my eyes. But it wasn't just the Mental Health Trust and hospital that failed so grievously. It was 2 police forces as well who had opportunities to stop him and to intervene, and they just didn't. And we expect the inquiry to be very far-reaching. And we do expect those who made such poor decisions and errors of judgment and, in some cases, lies and negligence, to have to answer for what they did. And it's not a pitchforks at dawn.
No.
If it means that people lose their jobs or are demoted, then so be it. It's a lot easier than losing your child or your father.
Her Honour Deborah Taylor has been put in to head up this inquiry. She will be the chair. Sinead, I know that you and the other families have met her. The terms of reference of this inquiry haven't been formally set out yet, but I know that you've all had conversations with her about what you want them to be. Sinead, what are your asks? What do you want the terms of reference of this inquiry to be?
We want there to be full accountability, and she has promised us that. We want individuals to give evidence, to account for their judgments, to account for their actions, or their failures, because there's clearly been failures, and the reason we have this inquiry is because all across government they've realised that even the inquiries to date haven't been adequately investigating the failures of different state agencies. Keir Starmer said this was going to be a victim-led or victim-centred inquiry, so we're hopeful that she will listen to us, but ultimately it's the accountability is the number one issue for us.
Emma, the Prime Minister has set a 2-year time frame.
Yeah.
Because the criticism of public inquiries is often that they can take too long and lose that sense of urgency. And I know that you have said that you would like proceedings to be broadcast in some sense. We see a number of public inquiries, like the Post Office inquiry, cameras allowed in.
Yeah.
Is that to keep up the momentum, to keep the eye on this, so that the ball isn't dropped, so that you can continue to follow this closely and hold people to account?
Yeah, as the government themselves has said, that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we've got nothing to hide, we've got nothing to defend, excuse me, or embellish. And I also believe that had we not taken all of the steps and all of the action that we've taken so far as families to expose all of these failures, which we've had to do very publicly and very painfully, we wouldn't be where we are today. I don't think that for a second. Whilst we welcome the inquiry, we've had to fight really hard to get it. So why now close doors? Because we're not a one-off peculiar case. There must be so many other miscarriages of justice, incompetence, that have happened that haven't ever been uncovered before, or people have felt they aren't able to challenge or push back. And I think we've got nothing to hide, so you have to tell the truth. The reason this needed to be, and thank God it is a statutory inquiry, is that those who are compelled to attend are compelled to attend, whether they've retired, whether they've left their job, whether they've been sacked, whatever's happened. And it's about getting those answers. And yes, accountability, but also moving forwards, some proper change.
There's always these lessons to be learned. It's actually a bit of a cliche that we're kind of sick about hearing, because we don't see any changes. There's still people dying every week because of mental health homicide. This needs to be a landmark public inquiry that brings about lasting change to practice.
Sinead O'Malley-Kumar and Emma Webber speaking to me earlier. Still to come here on the programme, the Prime Minister welcomes the Supreme Court's ruling on the legal definition of a woman as he's accused of a U-turn. And the IMF slashes the UK's growth forecasts in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs. We'll have the latest for you. The Prime Minister has welcomed the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on the legal definition of a woman. Commenting publicly for the first time since last week's decision, Sir Keir Starmer said that the judgment provided clarity.
I welcome the court's decision and ruling. I think it's very important that we've now got real clarity, which is going to be really helpful, I think, for everybody going forward, particularly those that have to deal with putting in place guidance. So I think that it's a good thing the Supreme Court have come to their decision. That does provide that clarity that I think will now enable us to ensure that all the guidance is in the right place, and to reaffirm something that I've long argued, which is about safe spaces for women. That's always been really important.
Political correspondent Tamara Cohen, who's been following this story today. Tamara, the Prime Minister says this has brought clarity, but there's still a lot of controversy about the decision.
Yes, that's right, and some of it came to the fore today. Keir Starmer said in his first comment since the Supreme Court ruling, which makes it very clear that a woman is a biological woman when it comes to single-sex spaces under the Equality Act. He said that he believes a woman is an adult female, and while that doesn't sound like news, Labour and his cabinet have been on quite a tortuous journey over this issue, and he says that there is now clarity and the public sector can now act on that. Now, the Equalities Minister, Bridget Phillipson, went to Parliament later in the day to answer MPs' questions about it, and she said there is a need to ensure this ruling is clear across a range of settings, from the NHS and prisons to sport and single-sex spaces like women's refuges. She said that she used to run one before going into politics, and she was left in no doubt about the importance of those spaces for biological women. There was quite a bit of dissent from Labour MPs. I counted about a dozen who raised questions about the trans community feeling fearful, feeling unclear about what facilities they can use. One MP said someone they knew a trans person in their constituency who transitioned 50 years ago now wondered about having to use different toilets. None of this was really made clear because the Equality and Human Rights Commission won't produce its guidance until the summer. So much of government is still waiting on that, although some organisations are acting already. Kemi Badenoch really went on the attack, the Conservative leader, against the Prime Minister, accusing him of a U-turn. It's obviously a U-turn the Conservatives welcome. She said that Keir Starmer should apologise because it was only 3 years ago that he was criticising an MP who said that only who said that only women have a cervix. Now, I put this to a Labour MP who supports the Supreme Court judgment and said, do you think Keir Starmer should apologise? And she said no, and this is the reason why. This is Tonia Antoniazzi.
Ultimately, politicians just want to be kind, and they want to serve their constituents, and they want to do the best job for people to live their best lives. The problem that we've got is that lobby was so strong, so much money behind it, that people fell into that trap. And now we've got to unpick it, we've got to solve it, and we've got people, to look after.
So that MP saying that campaign groups were sort of pushing politicians into taking this position. So the government say it's now clear, but clearly there are a number of questions about how this will work in practice that will need to be answered over the next weeks and months, and Labour MPs are going to be very involved in that debate.
Thank you. The International Monetary Fund says the UK economy will be amongst the hardest hit by a global trade war ignited by Donald Trump's tariffs. In a sobering set of projections, the IMF has slashed the UK's growth forecast by a third in its latest World Economic Outlook. It's bad news for the Chancellor, with Rachel Reeves preparing to meet her US counterpart, Scott Bessent, in Washington later this week. Our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, is in Washington.
So the IMF has just taken a big red marker to its forecast for the global economy, downgrading countries across the world, including the obvious victims like the US, China, Mexico and Canada, but also the UK. The fund's economists said that the UK economy would grow by just 1.1% this year. That's down from an estimate it had back in January of 1.6%. It's worth pointing out that it's not just trade wars that are going to hurt us. The IMF pointed to domestic problems like rising utility bills, for example, that are going to create cost of living pressures, as well as rising government borrowing costs. So it's worth keeping this fuller picture in mind as Rachel Reeves prepares to meet her US counterpart, Scott Bessent, later in Washington this week. She's trying to negotiate a reduction in tariffs, and undoubtedly any concessions would be welcome by our exporters, in particular our steel, aluminium and car manufacturers who are facing tariffs of 25%. But a deal with the US is not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve all of our economic problems. Rachel Reeves will have to weigh any potential benefits against the cost. This is a US administration that's shown that it's highly transactional in its dealings, even with allies. It's going to want concessions, and in particular, it's been eyeing up many of the non-tariff barriers, the regulatory barriers that are blocking its exporters. But if the price is, for example, reducing our food standards or our road safety standards, well, that could impair our ability to align more closely with the EU. And if you look at the pure numbers, the EU is the bigger prize, it's the bigger market. So Rachel Reeves, she's walking a tightrope here in Washington. There's only so much she can offer the Americans, and undoubtedly, there's only so much they're going to give her back in exchange.
Gurpreet Narwan in Washington for us tonight. Now, the Royal Navy's flagship HMS Prince of Wales has set off on an 8-month deployment to the Indo-Pacific. Military chiefs say the launch of the £3 billion aircraft carrier will send a powerful message of the UK's naval power as it leads a strike group made up of British, Norwegian and Canadian ships. The vessels will join exercises, operations and visits with 40 countries in the Mediterranean, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Japan and Australia. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, why the home of golf is opening its doors to amateurs for a discounted rate. And Ben Youngs, England's most capped male international, is to retire from all rugby at the end of the season.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks, but taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
The Premier League Run-In is live exclusively on Peacock. Catch your breath. Sunday, a strike towards Premier League history is in sight, with Liverpool on the edge of a second Premier League title. Full of tension, full of jeopardy, full of goals. Spurs look to thwart their trophy hopes. Everything magnified. This is the Premier League Run-In, live exclusively on Peacock.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, the chance to play one of the world's oldest golf courses for less than 50 quid. Dave is here with the sport. Do you play golf?
A little bit. I try, but just not very good.
Yeah, a little bit like me, but the chance to play at St Andrews for less than 50 quid, I might just dust off my clubs again.
It would take me 2 days to get round, though. That's the problem.
Probably take us 2 days
They'd have to
get
charge
up
me
there
twice.
Because it's just for Scottish residents, I think. I'm going to be talking to the Director of Engagement at St Andrews towards the end of the programme to find out a bit more about it. I think it's just for Scots, but that is a big discount. It's down from around 500 quid to around 50 quid.
Amazing. To get the game more accessible as well.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Lots of people.
All off the back of Rory McIlroy's success at the Masters. We're going to be talking about that at the end of the programme. But first, let's talk about rugby. Ben Youngs, England's most capped male international, to retire from rugby at the end of the season.
Yeah, he's had an unbelievable career, really, especially when you think about the physical nature of rugby union, the number of injuries that these players get. He's been at the top of the game for 18 years, made his debut as a 17-year-old for Leicester Tigers back in 2007 when he was still a youth team player. Went on to make his England debut in 2010. Alongside him in that England team when he made his debut was a man called Steve Borthwick, who's now the head coach of the England Rugby Union team. Just shows the longevity that he's had. Had a magnificent career internationally and domestically as well. 127 England appearances, as you say, the most capped England men's player. 4 World Cup appearances, 4 Six Nations titles. And crucially, when it comes to club rugby as well, he retired from international rugby a couple of years ago, and now he's decided that he's going to finish entirely at the end of this Premiership season. He's won 5 Premiership titles, could still win another one with Leicester Tigers
not done
this
just
season.
yet.
No, it would be amazing, though. And for him, I think he probably did have offers to continue playing. A couple of clubs in France were sniffing around maybe to offer him another contract. But from what he's been saying, I think he wouldn't want to potentially play against Leicester. He's been a one-man club, really, for his whole career. His whole career has been at Leicester Tigers. And really, for him today, that is what he's said has made it so special for him, the fact that he's been at Leicester Tigers for his whole career. It's been fantastic for him and for England as well. I mean, he's played under 4 different England head coaches, and every time a new England head coach came in, there were question marks. Is Ben Youngs going to be able to fit this style of play? And every single time, he answered those questions and then some. And every time his place was under question, the new head coach ended up picking him anyway because he was just undroppable almost at times. So a brilliant career for him. He had an injury, a health scare actually last year where he had to have open heart surgery, but has come back to play and has had a fantastic season and could end the season with a Premiership title.
What a send-off that would be.
Yeah. Tonight on the pitch, though, in the Premier League, a crucial game in the race for Champions League football next season.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I'm sorry, I just have a German passport. Hopefully I can convince them and show them and prove them that I'm proud to be the English manager.
For only the 3rd time in history, the FA have turned to a foreign manager to take charge of the men's England team. Thomas Tuchel follows in the footsteps of Sven-Göran Eriksson.
If we don't do results, of course, they will try to hang me, but even if I was an Englishman, they hang me. So that's...
And Fabio Capello.
A winner with a capital W. That was the template. This is the man.
When the news about Tuchel...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, as I was just discussing with Dave there, the world's oldest golf course is giving amateurs the chance to play around for less than 50 quid. In a bid to make the sport more accessible, Scottish players are going to be given the chance to play the old course at St Andrews for £42.50. The course, widely regarded as the home of golf, with the game having been played there since the 15th century. 179 tee times are going to be made available for players with a Scottish postcode, the reduced price over the summer, meaning more than 700 golfers will get a huge reduction on the normal rate. I'm sure a lot of people looking up distant Scottish relatives to head up there for a discounted round. Let's find out the rules. Everything comes with a slight catch, doesn't it? Let's talk to Director of Engagement at St Andrews Links Trust, Laurie Watson. Laurie, good to see you this evening. Hello.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you. So let's make it clear, this is just for Scots.
It is indeed. The Drive initiative is really targeted at giving Scottish golfers an opportunity to come along and have a St Andrews experience.
Yeah, talk to me about what a St Andrews experience is like, because it is seen as the home of golf. Anyone that's been lucky enough to play there doesn't stop talking about it. What's so special about it?
I think it's when you've got a sport that's, renowned as the birthplace of the game, the home of golf, as you say. I think it's an opportunity to fall in so many past champions. All the greats over the last 150 years have walked across the Swilcan Bridge and had a St Andrews experience, whether they've played good, bad or indifferent. And I think that's something that golfers around the world can aspire to, relate to, and if they can enjoy it, they want to have that bucket list opportunity too.
Yeah, what's prompted you to do this?
Well, I think we feel that, on the back of the pandemic, golf's enjoyed a sort of global explosion in participation. We've benefited from that. Our visitor numbers have gone up exponentially over the last few years. But we've always been a public links, and we're very proud of our public links heritage and giving people different opportunities to come and have a St Andrews experience across the 7 courses. And in this instance, we just wanted to be true to our heritage, but offer a new widened opportunity for golfers to have a chance at playing.
Yeah, it's such a famous backdrop, isn't it? So many golfers can only dream of playing there. And you've opened it up, as you said, to amateurs in Scotland to be able to get that experience. When will these tee times be made available? And what's the application process? Because I'm imagining the demand's going to be pretty high.
Well, we opened a ballot window today, so we have a daily ballot for the Old Course. This is separate from that, so we're inviting golfers from Scotland with our Scottish postcodes to get in touch via our website. It's got all the details about the dates. The first date's going to be the 21st of May, when it's going to be the Old Course times, and we're encouraging people to go to the website, fill in the form, take their chances. You know, certainly a few hours into announcing this, and we're delighted with the response, and it certainly seems to have resonated with the Scottish golfing public.
Yeah, take their chances. What are the rules for the application? Obviously, you want people to be Scottish, but a lot of people maybe be getting in touch with their Scottish granny to see if they can borrow a postcode.
Well, you know, I mean, we are open to all. So, you know, in this instance, this is something that might develop and evolve in years to come. So it might not just be in Scotland. But for now, you know, we want to really encourage Scottish golfers who've got a passion for golf and want to come and have that St Andrews experience to fill in their details. And the Old Course, it's going to be 2 balls, and we're going to pair people up. On the other golf courses, we're having opportunities for days for emergency responders to participate, you know, armed forces, disabled golf, and family. We're having a family golf day as well. So, yeah, it's incumbent on people to fill in the form as honestly as they possibly can, and then it literally will be a draw. So it's a free take your chances and see what comes out.
Yeah, of course. Listen, Laurie, good luck with it. Like I said, I'm sure demand is going to be huge, but head to your website. Do you want to give the website plug?
It's www.standrews.com, and it's really important that it's the Drive initiative that you find all the details for this scheme.
Of course, the home of golf would have the website standrews.com. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laurie. Good to talk to you there. Laurie Watson, Director of Engagement at the St Andrews Links Trust. Right, let's have a look at the weather. That's always important in golf, isn't it?
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next couple of days, showers and some more prolonged rain, but there will be drier and brighter spells as well. Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England will be wet and windy this evening. Most other places, though, looking dry. A few showers around, mainly across Ireland. Rain is going to spread across the southern heart of Britain overnight, becoming largely confined to central and southeast England later. Most other places looking dry, but showers will affect the southwest. Early rain in the south will clear tomorrow morning, leaving much of southern Britain cloudy with just some showery outbreaks. Ireland, pretty much similar. Elsewhere, sunny spells and a few showers, but the Northern Isles look grey and drizzly. It's going to be cooler than today in the east, warmer in the west.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
That's all from the UK tonight. Coming up next, it's The World with Yalda Hakim. We also have Anna Botting live in Rome. That's coming up after the break. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.